And the subtext of Barack Obama's campaign was, look, well, Shelby Steele said it, I'm the bargainer. I'm not the confrontationist like those reverends over there. And that was part of the reason why he was popular. It wasn't the whole reason, but that was an element of it that we cannot just ignore, because it is a subtext of racial conflict in this country that's been there for years. A new generation, bless their hearts, all of y'all who are not tainted by all the memories of the white and colored signs like my generation and the police dogs, et cetera. Barack Obama, Sarah Palin, both of them, too young to remember that. They could start with a different ground zero. And that's an important subtext of the campaign. It'll be left for historians to write about and for us pundits in retrospect, because during the campaign there's too much going on day to day to go after that broader picture. But one last note of hope. You go to YouTube. I check it every so often. The people who are, despite our journalism school lesson about how the public's got too short of an attention span to worry about anything longer than a 10-second soundbite, the numbers of people who go to YouTube to look at Barack Obama's 40-minute speech vastly outnumber the 3 or 4 minute sound bites of Reverend Wright and the number of hits that he is receiving. This offers me hope, because I think people out there do want to see the whole story, while we in the media, ironically, keep trying to give them less and less. And this is where the Internet is changing everything for the better.
So you wanted to pick up, and then I would ask for those of you who may have questions, as we are about 20 minutes left in this, to make your way. If you see 3 or 4 people, I would ask you to wait so you won't have to stand through the entire time.
I thought of 2 different points. One was the New Yorker magazine piece, which was, I guess, the fist bump, and it had Michelle Obama and the rifle and all this, and it was this,
another gaffe.
Another gaffe, and they were making this spoof, but some people believed this, and so they were saying, no, we're trying to neutralize this or put it out in the open so people can have a conversation. But in terms of the pushback and the difficulty it placed the campaign in terms of how do they respond to this, and the Republicans as well, in terms of how they kind of let that pass. But there was a lot of issue that made it very uncomfortable, which was, I guess, part of the point of that cover. The second part was in terms of identity. I think the conversation started, you talked about identity. Perspective and identity is really the common theme, because one interesting kind of point in that is if you look at Facebook, you mentioned YouTube, Facebook, Barack Obama has about 4 million friends, I believe. If you look at in terms of friends, got on Facebook or a friend, but if you looked at his African American coalition or his Latino coalition of friends, be a Latino friend, it was 13,000 people, 14,000 people. So if you had a choice to self-identify where you wanted to be part of mainstream, like this is what America is, and you were part of the main coalition versus just a myopic perspective. So the coalition itself should have been dictating how they saw America.
I want to say to your question about was it a benign decision. I'm not always quite sure about that. First of all, I want to say I really respect journalists. I used to be a former journalist. And journalists have an incredibly hard job that's only getting harder. And Clarence was talking a little upstairs how his job is very, very hard these days. They're doing more or less, no doubt about it. The benign neglect, well, MSNBC sure made a business decision by the way it's going, and as far as editorially with Rachel Maddow, Keith Olbermann. You remember just a few years ago they kicked Phil Donahue off the air, the #1 rated show on MSNBC, but he was too hot to handle before the war. They put Michael Savage on, remember that? CNN, Lou Dobbs, I think that's a good business decision for CNN, right? The ratings are good, but he's, I have a lot of problems with Dobbs. Lou Dobbs is I think, it's been very harmful to the Latino community. And Leslie is great that Leslie's there, and Alex is there too, right? But there is, 2/3 of Latinos are Democratic, right? And there's no Democratic perspective. Imagine a Latino who got on CNN to defend immigrants. I don't know if Lou Dobbs can be in the same building if that was to happen. So I think there are some decisions about the content and the editorial content that's going to be discussed on these networks and who gets included in the discussion, who doesn't. That's not, I don't blame the journalists for that. The journalists are working hard. It's definitely higher-ups.
So, Angie, before I go to the questions here, let me follow up with what was just said to the question that I had, and that goes back to the whole question of do you have to wait for a generation to die off? Because the reality is the unfortunate death of Tim Russert put David Gregory in that seat, and one is to believe that David will sit there for a mighty long time. George Stephanopoulos put in that seat will probably sit there for a mighty long time. My guess is when Bob Schieffer decides to retire, the look to who really sits in that seat will be a small number, mostly white males. There will be some minorities and females talked about and perhaps placed in that seat. But if you look at the news media, until these entities die off in terms of their sheer importance, the reality is all journalists, whether we want to admit it or not, want to be on mainstream stations because it gives you certain gravitas and class and the like. So if that is the case, when we look to solutions, what can we look to if, in fact, the game really has not changed that much? Because the good money was on David Gregory from the beginning. They talked about Gwen Ifill and they talked about others, but it was really more a fleeting conversation, almost like interviewing a black coach for the NFL. Well, we got to interview him, but we really are going to hire this guy. So what's your thought there?